Hello and welcome to Pravo Convos. I'm Drew Hanish, the CEO at Pravo Construction. I'm joined today by Kevin Stewart, the food and beverage studio director at Cushing Terrell. Hey, Kevin.
Hey, how you doing, Drew?
Thank you for joining us today.
You bet. Thank you for having me.
Kevin, if you would give us a brief explanation on your professional background and what got you into our industry.
Yeah, so, I started studying architecture in college 25-ish years ago. Um, and then after college, I moved out west and joined up with a firm and kind of immediately started getting put on food and beverage projects, hospitality projects, restaurants, bars, due to having worked my way through college in a various positions within the food and beverage industry. Um, so they just kind of leaned on me and some of my experience to help figure out, just some experiential input into design and intent and those things. I've always had kind of a strong, not attraction, but just I always just really appreciate the folks in the hospitality industry. I feel like I get what they're trying to do, and it's always jive with me. So I enjoy their personalities and hanging out with them. And
Yeah,
everything just kind of snowballed, and I just kept going more and more into restaurants and bar projects, and finally ended up as the food and beverage director at Fishing Terrell.
yeah, and definitely Austin's a great place to be doing that. And as we've seen, obviously the real estate market in Austin changed so drastically, certainly over my career over the last decade, but certainly over the last couple of years. And so what have you seen over the last few years in the Austin market in the hospitality and food and beverage industry?
Yeah, so it's been really interesting. There's in addition to some of the larger outfits. Well, let me back up. So to lay the groundwork, Austin was always kind of a fun spot. A bunch of creative folks, smaller, independently owned restaurants. There was kind of a almost pushback. There wasn't a Chili's downtown or any sort of national
Sure.
chains. Yeah, and then Austin started growing, um, and a lot of wealth came in, a lot of opportunity, as well as just some of those people that move in appreciate those national concepts. A lot of them execute really well, and so there was a real melding of opportunity and lack of those kind of larger national chains. So that brought in more people and more attention, um, and more talent. And I think what's happening now is still a lot of those larger restaurant groups are moving in, um, which I think is great. They're bringing in the talent, and a lot of that talent is actually peeling off and trying to develop their own brand, their own stake. They've worked really hard to get where they
Yeah,
are, and they see that Austin is a place of opportunity, which I still totally believe.
absolutely.
Um, yeah, and I think that it's also very accepting of new ideas and new concepts and new experiences, and really appreciates um, those those you know um, concepts. And so it's really a supportive environment. I think the most difficult things are costs, finding space, executing on those, um, executing on developing the restaurants and the hospitality experiences. Um, so that's kind of my, I don't know. It's a lot
Yeah.
more difficult, but it's also, I think it's more technically difficult on the financial side. I think if you have
Mhm.
a good concept and you bring your passion, Austin is very supportive of that.
Yeah.
They're, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So I
rambling.
have I have some questions for you on kind of cost, space, execution. But you mentioned a little bit on the design and creativity side, uh, which has certainly drawn me to that space of hospitality and in some of the creativity around that. And I have a quote here from you, and I pulled this from an article of yours. It says, "Let creativity reign without the immediate concern of constructability." Explain to us a little bit, like what does that mean to you? Certainly in the hospitality space, that what does that mean to you?
So to me, hospitality is about the experience. Um, and I grew up, in addition to working in the food and beverage industry, I worked construction right out of school. For a long time, I approached design from my mindset of how would I build that? Can that be built? And and that really limited my design thinking, my creativity.
Yeah.
Some of the technologies that are available now, some of the things that we just 3D printing of metals and 3D mills, and there's just not only that, but Austin's capabilities as a construction environment. The subcontractors and the talent that can be pulled is really impressive, and they bring ideas that you kind of show them what you're trying to do, and they can pretty much figure it out. So I like to kind of not focus on constructability at the beginning, focus on that client experience, how the patron's going to walk through the space, what are some real design opportunities, what are some places that we can really wow, or that we can really reinforce the brand aesthetic, and then kind of take a take a beat and make sure we're not going too crazy,
Mhm.
um, and kind of figure things out. But what I don't like is developing a really kind of easy to build sterile space and then layering in design elements on top of that. I feel like
Yeah.
that's picked up on,
Yeah.
versus developing something that's really kind of impressive and maybe a little over the top, and then you kind of strip it back and you figure out what are ways that we can accomplish the same thing. Maybe we can take that out and substitute another design move in. um, you know um, uh, a lot of times people in the industry will start focusing right off the bat on acoustic solutions or lighting solutions or material solutions, and that if you approach that from the beginning, that can really limit what you're thinking about the space is. But there's so many ways to solve for those things that it's just not necessary to really focus on those at the beginning. I think it's necessary to focus on the mood, touch points, materiality, experiential elements, and then kind of either figure it out from there, or edit some things down.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and you mentioned kind of the hesitation for the city of Austin, um, for bringing in those big national food chains kind of historically. And to me, really what that meant, and what we kind of see is it's definitely cultural, right? There's the city of Austin, and in our high user experience and hospitality, what I see from that is, you know, the need for people like yourself and bringing those higher levels of design. You're really having to tap into some of that cultural, some of that authenticity, some of that nostalgia when you're building a user experience space here in Austin that people are wanting to venture out to and want to be a part of versus those big national brands. And so, when you do bring in that big kind of national brand here to Austin, you know, what are some things that you think that they could do to try to tap into something that is what I think is unique, to the Austin culture, to make their brand successful?
you know, this is a really good question. Um, there is a lot of push and pull, a lot of tension associated with the Austin that I moved to 20 plus years ago
Mhm.
versus the Austin that is now. But that tension has really always been there. We've always had the legislature versus, the hippie culture back in the 60s and 70s. And
Mhm.
that's just kind of grown and developed, and it's always contributed to the overall success of Austin. I think the DNA is still there. I think that people, for the most part, are looking for authentic experiences. Um, but they also, as previously stated, they um, understand a strong hospitality concept. They appreciate great execution. Some of those things that the national or larger regional players bring to the game. So, in tuning into the Austin market, I think that there's opportunities for both building community. There's a lot of restaurants, not even design wise, they're building community. They're establishing kind of connections with urban farm concepts, or there's even an
Hmm.
urban rancher that I met recently. Um, but as far as design goes, Austin and the surrounding area are filled with a lot of talented artists, artisans. Um,
Yeah.
there's graphic artists, um, furniture makers, the cabinetry makers, the metal workers. There's just such a ton of talent, and so I would suggest that they engage with that community. There's always opportunities for decor and elements from Austin or inspired by Austin that can be infused in the space. I get a little, I don't like it when they dial in and they're just, copying a mural from a different project and putting that up, or putting photographs of different kind of historic landmarks, so let's
Yeah.
say Barton Springs, in their space. But if you really engage with the local community, it just happens.
Yeah.
People pick up on it. There's a vibe to Austin. It spans a whole bunch of aesthetics, but it's
Yeah.
authentic and it's real. And I would say engage with that community and try to infuse those elements in the space.
Yeah, definitely. And, just looking back after you're saying one thing that's really standing out to me, which is engaging with the artisans. Some of our most successful hospitality projects, or use your experience, even in the corporate interior, was engaged, whether it's street artists that are doing graffiti or something like that within a corporate interior space. We've had, kind of miss metals and architectural metals packages from artisans that are 20, 30 miles outside of downtown Austin, but they're a part of the community, and they're the artisan of that trade. Um,
Hmm.
thing with millworks, and so that's something that really kind of stood out to me, which is like engaging the artisans of our community. So to kind of bring that full circle, which is your comment on letting the creativity reign without the immediate concern of constructability, what role do you think does the construction company, your contractor partner, play in making that a reality?
They're key. I love having a general contractor on board early on. Not only are they a great partner that kind of helps guide conversation, um, you know, timelines, all the logistical stuff, but they
Yep.
bring a creativity. A good contractor brings creativity to the table. Um, if they can interpret a design idea that you're going after, they'll know the consultant or the subcontractor that could execute on that, and they could bring that person in as a partner early on to help develop that towards an eye towards cost and constructability. Um, I also think that they are great in identifying both missed opportunities, um, or maybe things that are played out, like, oh hey, we're building 5 or 6 restaurants. I mean, we talked before this, and you guys are definitely involved in the hospitality industry in Austin with
Yeah.
everything you're building. And you guys have a pulse on what's being built, what's being designed, and so there might be a little pushback on some things, like, oh hey,
Yeah.
that's really great, but we're doing that. And it's always
Hmm.
horrible to design, see something executed, you're a month into construction, and then another spot opens and you
Yep.
gotta kind of pivot some things. So I think that that's key too. And then
That's a
just,
very real world thing that just
yes,
happens. We were just in the early on stages of selecting finishes on a project and totally had to make a shift
yeah.
in the architectural design of the project.
Yeah, I mean it's a real fear. So again, the more partners that are involved in the industry, kind of the stronger the project is. But yeah, I would say that, again, first the analytical, logistical, timeline, budgeting, all those things. Um, there's also, throughout the project, there's value engineering opportunities with subs,
Yep.
just in minor things, light fixtures, non-decorative light fixtures, plumbing fixtures, whether your MEP consultant is specing all copper and you guys come back and say, well, let's do PEX because that flips through
Yep.
our analysis. But, aside from that, um, the the partnership that helps develop the design and push the design and bring the right people on board is really key. And then also, you guys have a pulse on delivery times, lead times for things, critical path items. There's been a few times where, the whole design is pivoted upon or based upon some tile or some finish. And then, those tiles and finishes are 6 months out and that just doesn't work. Or it does work. We just need to order them now and put them in a warehouse. And so having that partnership, I think, is really key as well.
Yeah, in our experience, in construction, there's all these different market sectors. When we look at hospitality, food and beverage, one thing runs true is our ability to get in early into a project to be able to help the project be more successful. That seems to be across all the different types of industry types. Specifics to hospitality and food and beverage are those things that you talked about. To us, that is, we're looking for a team that's very, very much interested in working with a really creative design team. They're interested in working and tinkering in those gray spaces to be able to sit down with the design team, with the owner, understand what their vision is for the overall project, understand how the designer and architect want to bring that to life, and then be able to kind of translate, be the paintbrush for the art, piece, right?
Yep.
And help connect to those pieces. So there's a really big, when we look at like the people within our company that are doing that and doing that well, they very much like the design and the art piece that they're interested in bringing to life. That may not always be the case on different product types that we do, where it may be much more of a process, much more systematic, much more cost driven or schedule driven. Not that these projects aren't, but there's definitely that need and desire from our teams to want to be a part of that. And yeah, and we can go into, some things that are true across all different project types, which are, we're able to help manage the budget early on. We're able to help manage the scope with material selections on different lead times. We can find similar products that may be cheaper, that may have different lead times, that may be acceptable. And, there usually ends up being, I would say, anywhere from 5 to 8 really in-depth architectural design things that we're working through with that artisan type. And so you need to be in very early on to help tinker through that and make sure it's meeting schedule and budget. That's kind of the role that we feel like we play specifically to the food and beverage space.
Totally. And yeah, much more concisely put than my ramblings.
No, I know. I think, when we look at putting those teams together, we purely look at the team's desire to want to be a part of that, making an art piece, right?
Yeah.
Making it special, getting into understanding what the owner wants to bring to life.
Yeah.
And that type of person is a little, can be different than, other types of people in construction that can be wildly successful in other different product types.
Right. You're absolutely correct. There are so many different types of construction, so many different types of every kind of project. But it's not necessarily a special person that likes being involved in the kind of higher design concepts. But it is a different kind of person that really
Yeah.
likes being involved in that stuff, and
Yeah.
those people are key to identify early on because in my mind, there's a little bit more attention to detail and a little bit more painful process associated with, one wall could have six finishes and
Yeah.
three elements of decor on it, and it's got to be lit perfectly versus a tilt-up concrete warehouse, which,
Sure.
has probably got an aggressive schedule and the scale of it is huge. So different,
Yeah.
different personality traits, I think.
Yeah. So switching gears a little bit, we talked a little bit, about, central Austin and kind of how the real estate market in the central business district. What are some specific areas of Austin, neighborhoods, or emerging centers around Austin, Buda, Dripping Springs, Spicewood, Driftwood, some of these areas where we're seeing some big booms in hospitality. What are some areas in Austin that you see kind of some of the most growth and maybe different product types within the hospitality space in those areas?
Yeah, well, you know, A, the areas around Austin are booming just as much as Austin is booming. Um, There's a real opportunity for um, hospitality concepts specifically, I think, to export out into these surrounding communities. Round Rock's been booming forever. They've got, secondary locations for tons of restaurants. Cedar Park is growing exponentially.
Yeah.
I think that they've got just I know that one of my previous clients is headed out there. I just read this morning that I think it's the bagel shop. I can't remember. I think it's Rosen's Bagels just opened a second location there.
Mhm.
Um, we're seeing that happen. Um, Buda is booming. Kyle is booming. You know, Manor is also booming. It's just the opportunities are kind of endless. It's just finding the right fit. I also think that the area around Driftwood is mm, about to see a ton of new projects. There's uh, some experiential kind of lodging that's out there, some glamping concepts. Everybody heads out there for weddings. So I think that that's an area that's really about to blow up. I think the whole wine trail out to Fredericksburg is crazy with winery, but there's not much wineries, but there's not much in the way of food along that trail. So I think that there's an opportunity there. What the new Waterloo Group is doing out in Fredericksburg with Hotel Albert and those concepts from maybe hospitality, I think is going to kind of put an anchor down. Um, and hopefully there'll be some infill between. Um, even, when we're talking about Dripping Springs, I remember when Belterra Village was going up and everybody was just like, what is going on? You can't just build out in the middle of nowhere and expect it to
Mhm.
fill in. And that's like, it's got every little Austin concept in it, and
Yeah.
it's doing great. And so, with some of the issues the city's faced with growing so quickly, traffic and congestion and those things, these surrounding communities, they moved to the Austin area to have that kind of Austin lifestyle, and they don't want to drive an hour in traffic to get to a great new restaurant downtown, so they're looking elsewhere. We've definitely seen that. We live in East Austin, and we've definitely seen the infill along Manor Road. It's now happening on MLK, even moving out past us down East 7th with Holiday on 7th is a great concept out there.
Yep.
So there's just, there's so much opportunity in the surrounding areas that I think that that's where we not should be, but I think that's where a real focus is.
Yeah. So lastly, what advice would you give a client wanting to develop a concept in Austin?
Get your team together quickly. Um, get them, you know, make sure everybody knows each other. And when I'm saying team, you're probably going to need a real estate agent. You're going to need, uh, an accountant, a banker. You're definitely going to need an architect. If sometimes they're also designers, sometimes they're not. A designer. Um, I think some of the other consultants that aren't necessarily, super necessary, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, structural, I don't think, those have to be brought on, but maybe a civil engineer. A lot of times, if you're going into either a vacant plot of land or um, an older building or even a more recent building, there are some aspects to the site that might need to develop or get developed. Make sure you have the right utilities, the right, do you have a grease trap? Kind of run all of the, um, you know, due diligence on whatever
Mhm.
you're looking to do. Having that recommend to clients or friends that they find an architect, whether it's my team or somebody else, as well as a general contractor early on, because in my mind, those projects to me have been the most successful in the past, and it just seems to be the best way to do it.
Well, Kevin, thank you for joining us today on Pravo Combos. I really appreciate your insights. And thank you to our listeners. Hopefully, we added a little bit of value to you here today. And thank you for joining us again on Pravo Combos.
You bet. Thank you.